2020. The board meeting of the Winfield Fire Protection District. Randy, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome.
President Callis.
Present.
Secretary Suss.
Here.
Trustee Simpson.
Here.
Trustee Allen.
Here.
Also present, Chief Evans and Deputy Chief Firmer and Attorney Joe Miller. Absent is Treasurer Left.
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of and closed session also? So moved. Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passed. Public comment. If you don't feel like talking now, we're going to give you an opportunity at the end, but anything to say? Okay. There's no public out there. Reports. Treasurer is absent. I believe that we have the treasurer's report in our packet. And we also have James Howard here and Anthony Wisbot. Thank you. You'll be part of this report too, I believe, correct? Okay. Okay.
All right, everybody, I will share with you the 9 months ended January 31st, and then we can go and review Anthony's work on the bond issuance. Is there an ability for me to share my screen?
Yeah, of course.
Give me 1 second, James.
Sure.
Should be good now.
Perfect. All right, so we're 9 months into our fiscal year ended January 31. We'll start with some revenue highlights again. That's 75% of the way through. We've collected 112% of our total revenue budget, so we've exceeded our expectation. 2.7 million in property taxes. That's 100% and unchanged from last month. Both major installments from the county. Ambulance fees, we've collected 1.1 million, so that's 57% better than budgeted. But we did just get our invoice from the state for GEMT quarters 1 and 2 of 2022 of about 94,000. So again, that's something we'll have to pay back to the state, and then we can expect another invoice for quarters 3 and 4. Personal property replacement tax is in at about 44,000. That's the business tax, comes in about 8 times a year. That's already more than double its budget. And then grant revenue from the Central DuPage Hospital of 450,000 took us to 100% as well. So again, 75% in, we've beaten our budget and beaten the budgets across almost every revenue category. So that's a good year on the revenue side. We hit our numbers. You can see taxes in at 100% up 1, ambulance service up 57%, over budget up 72% over last year. Again, that does include the GEMT at 100%. So we need to pay back that 50. So that's still something to be paid back. We'll vet the invoice against the detail before we make that payment. It's due at the end of March. Replacement taxes obviously look good as we discussed. The grant is in total at 100%. A little bit of investment income there. We're double what we expected. Just as the Fed has continued to raise rates, we get a little more bang for the buck on those money markets. And I know we're trying to get an investment plan in place with Sawyer Falduta, which will even increase that number more. And then again, we've made our transfer for the year to that capital fund. So about 4.6 million in total. We budgeted 4.1. Last year we were at 4 million. So up 12%, better than budget, up 14% over last year. Look at the distribution again. Taxes are going to lead the way at 59%. Ambulance fees 24, replacement tax 1, our grant from the hospital at about 10%, miscellaneous 1, and then that transfer accounts for about 5%. Next slide, for January, we collected about 92,000. If you remember, we had to accrue back the December. We just didn't see the cash hit the account yet. So it was 154,000 in December, and then January down to 92. But again, we're averaging about 122,000 a month, beating our budgeted average as well as the 12-month average for 22 at 73,000. There's expenditures, again, 75% of the way through. We've expended 66% of our total budget. Operations at 68%, comps and benefits at exactly 75%, or about 1.7 million. Buildings and facilities, 56%, equipment, vehicle maintenance, 38, training and education, 39. So again, as we look at that, this line by line, the percent of budget column, again, we're at 75% or better, or below, I should say, across almost all accounts. The exception being the pension fund. Again, that money comes in and we pay that back to the pension fund as we get it. Again, comp and benefits, the main driver here at 75% through 75% of the way of the budget year, and it's up 5% year on year. All in, 3 million spent for ops on 4.4 million budgeted. We're at 68%, down about 4% from last year. And then down below that, small amount of capital outlay, about 67,000, and then the other side of that transfer out. In terms of the distribution, comp and benefits make up about 72%. The pension fund 12, legal and professional 3, admin 3, building and facilities costs about 2, firefighter medical equipment, maintenance and ops about 4%, fire and rescue 1, some smaller percentages around the rest of the way. Foreign fire is about 1%. So after 9 months, you see we're in a nice surplus. Again, that's going to come down over the 3 remaining months of the fiscal year. 1.3 million. We started with 4.1, so we're at about 5.4 million in ending fund balance. Again, our fund balance ratios look very good at 165%, but that also will come down as it's mainly expenditures the rest of the way. You can see in a better position in terms of our surplus at this point in the year, and a lot of that on increased revenue as well as some decreased expenditures. Investment wise, about 4 million at the bank. Again, we're going to do better once we switch over to SORA. I'll do it for some of these investments. You can see 25 basis points. Again, not super competitive given most of the fixed income portfolio that John and his team will build. They'll be north of 4% as bonds and treasuries look very good at this point. That concludes my presentation, but I'd be happy to take any questions on the financial analysis.
I have a question. It may not even apply. In the monies that we have to pay back the state in our ambulance collection funds, now that we know kind of what it is there a fund that we can set that money aside in and gain interest on it? Or is it smarter to use it for operations?
You know, I think as long as we have it budgeted, we're okay to keep it in our money market accounts. And that's the important thing, is that we know it's going to be an expenditure at some point during the year. The timing of the state, we don't know. We can't really figure that at this point, but we want to at least budget for a full year's worth of GEMT, and we can do that through the budget, and then you can just keep the money in your money market account and move it to the checking account when you need to make the payment.
Thank you.
We had budgeted 200,000 for that, and our first outlay was 94. So I think we're actually doing pretty good in terms of projecting it.
Very good guess. Are we finished? Any other questions?
Thank you, James.
Okay.
No, you're welcome.
Yes, please.
If you don't. Great.
We'll keep all this money matters all together.
Yeah.
While you have our attention, and you're welcome to a cookie.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm good. Thank you. I've had plenty of cookies in my day. My kids eat them all now. So I sent some numbers to James that I'm sure he shared regarding the project. So I'll talk a little bit about what alternate revenue source bonds are, how they work, what the process is going to be, and then just if you have questions as I go, please ask. So with the issuance of alternate revenue source bonds, you're authorized as a fire district to issue general obligation alternate revenue source bonds, which are paid by a dedicated revenue source, and then they have a separate unlimited property tax backup. The way that works is you pledge to use that revenue source, which is essentially your operating revenues, the taxes you already collect. And then every year when you do your traditional tax levy at the end of the year, you abate the backup property tax on the alternate revenue source bond. So that's why you're allowed to issue them, because you're not supposed to levy and collect that separate line item property tax unless the pledged revenues are not available. So what that does is it allows you to issue these GL bonds without going to voter referendum for that. Obviously, gone to referendum for the revenue source, you don't have to go to referendum for the issuance of the bonds now. To issue the bonds, it's a 3-meeting process, we'll call it. You first you issue or you approve as a board what's called an authorizing ordinance. That ordinance sets the maximum amount that you want to issue. It sets for the basic project description and revenues. That is published in local newspaper, which starts a 30-day backdoor petition period. So that allows your residents to petition you to go to referendum for the bonds. It would require 7.5% of registered voters to petition you to go to referendum in that 30-day period. Once that 30-day period runs out, you're able to approve a bond ordinance to authorize the issuance of the bonds. Between that time, we do a bond issue notification act public hearing, bond hearing. We do it, right before traditional or a board meeting, just like we would your budget or anything like that. Allow public to answer or ask questions or speak their grievances, whatever they may do. Generally, they're not attended usually.
Yeah, I haven't had more than 2 people to bind a hearing ever.
Yeah.
And I've never had anything where we got the 7.5%. So I wouldn't worry about that either.
No, it's very, very rare.
This is one.
This is one. Yeah, I live here too, so I have to start that power.
So those are the steps required in order to get to the point where we can authorize the bond resolution and then issue the bonds. Between all of that, you're talking about issuing approximately $8 million. You're issuing it over a period of 20 or plus, 25 years, whatever, and the term ends up being. But so we're looking at doing a public sale of the bonds, and in a public sale, what we would do as your advisor is first prepare an official statement, which is the offering document that is used to market bonds to investors and underwriters. So we prepare that. We send it around for input from you if there's information that we need filled in that wasn't public or available to be put together by us. You would need a bond rating, so we'll facilitate that process. Go to the rating agency that we choose, get a credit rating assigned for the bonds and for the district, and then we have to determine a method of sale. So that would either be the competitive sale, where we do all of that. We put the official statement out there for 2 weeks, let investors and underwriters see it, and then we take bids from underwriters, and the best bid wins. That includes their interest rate and their fee. Certain instances, depending on the outcome of the rating, or the market in general, but generally the outcome of the rating, it may not be advisable to go with a competitive sale in that manner, so we would do a negotiated bond sale, and that's where we pick the underwriter ahead of time. We negotiate with them their fee, and then they bring it to market, sell it to investors, and then we, as your advisor, opine on the rates if they're fair, given the light of the current market. So I don't have the answer to which way we would go now, because it's a few-month process, and we also have to kind of start to look at what the bond rating is going to come out at. But we generally lean competitive if we can, try to do it via competitive sale, unless there's a reason not to. So it's kind of the rule of thumb that I think of. That all happens in that kind of 2-month process when you're doing the backdoor referendum and then the binding hearing. We have you approve that ordinance and then sell the bonds, close a couple weeks after sale. So when you sell the bonds, you're locking in the rates. Closing the bonds is when your funds hit your account. So knowing that it's that kind of 3.5 month process until start to funding, then we work backwards and we say, okay, when do you want to see money hit the account? And we can work backwards from there. If we start the process and get the authorizing ordinance done and the binding hearing done, and then project's delayed and we want to pause for a little bit, all of that pre-work we've done is good for 3 years. So, you know, there's no, you can always pause the process once you've started and, you know, wait on the actual bond resolution and the sale of the bonds. So we, you know, the next step would be, let me know, timing, you know, when funding is needed at the moment, and then I come up with a timeline, all of the steps that are required for the issuance. Put together a distribution list when they did work with a bond counsel firm to get the authorizing ordinance written and the binding hearing language and all of that.
So you work with Chapman, right, I assume?
We work with all of them in this state. I work with Chapman a lot.
Is that who you plan on using for bond counsel for this?
I was gonna ask if you had an opinion.
Yeah, generally I work with Chapman and Cutler. For me, it's for your bond counsel. Then our firm would serve as local counsel. Anthony, like you talked about the official statement, they send a preliminary official statement. We take a look at it. Generally, they do a really good job. The information that maybe changes are just district information that I wouldn't expect them to know, you know, like sometimes trustee changes or just like minor things, but it's a fairly smooth process. You know, as Anthony talked about, you're abating it. So generally what I have done is you do the levy in say December, and then we'll abate in January, as long as the county gets it, I think by March 1. Yeah.
I always say the end of February.
Yeah.
to be safe.
Then it'll be abated. So it's not like it's not like the taxpayers are paying extra money.
No,
And that's why no one sees that. That's why I've never seen anyone do the 7.5%, because you know, it's not extra money that they're paying. So.
yeah, so I mean, to your point, if it's understood correctly, the taxpayer doesn't see a line item at all on their property tax bills. The tax gets put on at the time of closing, but then abated every year before the tax bills go up. So there's never a line item that says the Winfield Fire Protection District bond and interest. That doesn't come on. So, yeah, and to your point, I've seen it once in terms of, you know, a petition happening that was a very odd situation. So typically these things get issued throughout the state on a regular basis for non-home rule entities, and they're generally smooth.
Am I to assume this is probably not the greatest time to go for a bond with interest rates?
Well, I'll put it in perspective. It was worse in October. It's getting better now. Where we'll be in 3 months is anybody's guess. We've got the Fed isn't necessarily helping with raising rates, but they're not hurting because the curbing of inflation has helped to the extent that the news comes out that it continues to be curbed, because you know, every day is a different thing. So, you know, we think about that and say, okay, well, is now not the right time? I would, you know, let the project drive when you need the funding. Obviously, if the sky falls and we need to push funding for a month, we can always do that. The bonds, if we issue them over a 20 or 25-year period, they are refinanceable after 8 to 10 years whenever we set that call option. So it's not as if we lock in a 4% rate today, we couldn't refinance it in the future.
After how long?
So we set the call option actually when we issue the bonds. It's something that we determine when we put the official statement together. Typically it's 8 to 10 years in that period. So I would say no longer than 10, no shorter than 8 is typical.
You want to give they got to get a chance to make their money.
Right.
Yeah, and you know, 10 is standard. You can go shorter. If you start to go too much shorter than what is, you know, typical, the bondholders or the investors aren't as interested in the bonds, right? So you'll pay a premium. What that is, it's hard to quantify sometimes.
Or you can push it out a little further and maybe they'll give you a better rate.
I wouldn't go past 10. It's just not standard. And then you're just hurting yourself. And you want that flexibility. And we typically push earlier because prior to 2017, you used to be able to do what was called an advance refunding. So that meant if rates were low, you could refinance bonds if they weren't callable for a year or two, put the money in an escrow, earn interest on that escrow up to the bond yield, and then the bonds would be effectively refunded with new tax exempt bonds. Now, you can only do, on a tax exempt basis, you can only do a current refinance, which means the escrow can be no longer than 90 days. So everybody, once that happened, once the new tax law came in, they call options started getting shorter because your flexibility just diminished, and now you can only do it with 90-day current fundings.
You used bonds plural every time you mentioned them.
Yeah.
Is this issued like one in one instrument, and we take all the money that we need in one bond, or is it a series of smaller bonds
So
that are
that
issued?
for you, it'll look and feel like a loan. You'll have payments, regular payments, semi-annual interest payments, semi-annual interest, annual principal payments that you'll make to a paying agent bank that'll send you an invoice. In reality, what this is a series of bonds sold in $5,000 blocks to different investors. So that's why the nomenclature would be bonds, because there are many bonds over a 20 to 25 year maturity schedule that get sold to different places. But to the district, it's one instrument that sold a series of bonds. That said, you can sell them all at once. You can sell them in pieces depending on your project needs. You have 3 years, you have to reasonably believe you're going to spend the money within 3 years after you issue. So that's why the project really should drive the issuance of the bonds when you're going to do it. You don't want to do it now and not need the bulk of the funds for 4 years, because you're just sitting on that paying interest. And now, it's a weird situation now because you can earn so much on the short end. But at the same time, it's just, you're burning interest for no reason.
Yeah, so that was my next question, was given the timetable of a construction project, and knowing that it's going to be potentially a couple of years before our final payments are due. So do we, and I guess this is kind of a question for you and James.
Yeah.
Do you take out, or do you suggest that we take out all the money up front and then just have that sitting in reserve, or that we do pace it out?
Yeah.
And given the kind of the uncertainty of the market,
Absolutely.
we should wait a little bit to take some of those funds.
I'll tell you what, there's no right or wrong answer. There's always a different situation depending on how long that construction schedule is. And also, if you're putting any of your own money in it as well, right? So if you have money to come in on the front end that we can push off the bond issue with, we can definitely do that. The other thing is, you could use, say you have money, you have $1 million of the 8 million, or it's a $9 million project, you've got $1 million you're putting in. You want to use that on the back end. We could do that where you use it up front and then get reimbursed out of the bond issue, and then use it again in the back end. So there's a lot of ways to play that game depending on the construction schedule. I would say it starts with looking at that construction schedule, what the term is, when you're going to need the bulk of your funds, and then we decide, okay, what is it? When is it best? Because we've certainly done it, and James and I've done it in other places where these projects are going to be over a long period of time, and we do tranche now and then a tranche in 3 years. Give them, a couple years to spend down the money and then come back and issue the remainder. But you don't want to do too many issues, because every time you go to the market, you're going to be paying costs.
Right.
So, why pay all these costs to all the service providers and go through the time of doing a bond issue every year? Maybe every 3 years, but certainly not every year. So you just got to find that sweet spot.
On the issue of cost, though, you're not writing a check, it's coming out, it would be done out of the bond.
Comes out of proceeds.
So that you're not writing this check, like my fees, Chapman Color fees, everyone else's fees.
Yeah, but it's
Right, but it still costs.
Absolutely, it's not a drawdown loan, right? We don't just authorize the loan and you pull on it when you need to, like a letter or a line of credit. This is a bond issue. On the day of closing, funds are sent, everybody gets paid, and now you've got all this money, and if you don't need it for a long period of time, it's not as efficient.
Does this add a tax? I know that you said when things go right. But does it add a tax line to the digital tax bill on the county assessor's website? So if I looked at my property tax bill after this has been issued, is it temporarily there?
No, it's not there at all, because you're abating it before they issue the tax bills. So it won't be there, because you're essentially saying, don't levy this for us. so it will not be on your.
What happens if something catastrophic happens and we can't abate that back?
Then.
I mean, has it ever happened?
I'm not aware of that ever happening, where someone, but in theory, under that scenario, then yes, it will be on your tax, it will show up.
And then show up on-
Okay.
It has happened that districts, for one reason or another, levy that tax. Here's what I'll say, the way the mechanism should work is if you had you have a pledged revenue, that pledged revenue is not sufficient for debt service for whatever reason. You are within your legal right to levy the tax so that bondholders get paid. That's 1 year. Next year, you're doing that analysis all over again, right? So if something happened in year 1 or year 2 or year 3, then in year 4, you have the money, you then abate the tax. So it could be a 1-year thing, it could be, I'll tell you what, the way these pledges work in a fire district, it's not really applicable, I would say, because you're pledging kind of the whole kitchen sink, you're pledging everything you collect. And if everything you collect wasn't more than the debt service and the bonds, I think we all have larger problems if that were the real case. The way that the mechanism works for like a water deal where water revenues aren't sufficient to pay for operations and then debt service, then the tax levy comes in for like a municipality. That's how that would work, but in this kind of pledge situation, you're pledging everything that you take in. There's not a really good situation in where you would have the legal authority to levy that tax.
And the reality is they wouldn't issue the bonds if we couldn't afford to pay it.
That's it. These are coming out of operations. There's no separate line item, right?
Yeah.
So, we've got to know what that.
We're not a bad investment.
And, you get the bonds rated, they're giving you a credit rating on, not only your economy, but your finances, management, all of those things. So, that's the message to the investors is that the credit rating agency came in here and gave you a grade. Essentially.
It's also a message to the taxpayer, because, we come in with a bad bond rating, what does that say about it?
Yeah, exactly. So.
Sorry.
So you said this is a 3-meeting process. For our purposes, is that essentially going to be 3 meetings in a row? Or does this require special meetings? Like, do we need to get moving on this very quickly based on the construction schedule? Or where does that put us?
Not necessarily, in theory, it could be 3 meetings in a row. I mean, could we do a special meeting? Yeah, I mean, I've seen that happen. But it's not gonna be like 3 meetings in 3 weeks or anything like that's what because there still is the binder requirement that has to be published. So there's some requirements. So I'm thinking, like
3
over
months.
3 months.
Okay.
I think if the reality of it is, you gotta start the process 3 months before you're ready to break ground. So.
And like I said, we could also, you determine approximately how much you want to borrow, things are set in place, but you don't exactly know when you want to issue. We could get the first 2 steps done. That's good for 3 years. And then during that time, we could be working on when that last step happens.
Then we get the final numbers from construction and then construction
Start to
stuff, then
realize.
we go, okay,
Yeah.
So we might as well go ahead and just start planning for the next 2 meetings to get those first couple items done. We know what's happening.
but so we say we should probably put on the agenda for next.
That would be my recommendation.
We'll talk about that.
Or
I just-
whatever the administration and
No, I mean,
the attorney.
I want you to get the increase, you haven't actually received your increased tax revenues yet. And I think it'll look better for your bond rating to actually
Know what the
know
new tax rate is.
that, what that dollar is.
Let's look at June.
Well, the first installment will be June 1. But they'll release the figures early March. Yeah.
All right.
So for my purpose, and Anthony, him and James I'm a lawyer. I'm not an accountant, financial dude. But my gut says it will look better that they know that
Dude now.
Yeah. I worked hard for that. Dude.
You should hear what I called other people.
No longer sport coach, you're wearing a sweater.
Promotions don't get you woman.
I just think it would look good for them to be able to put in, the idea that, your levy has gone from here to here, because now it looks like you got more money.
So maybe start with the 8.
Yeah, maybe, once we know where the county's at.
So I get to that point, and that'll go to, we're not gonna go to the bond rate. Realistically, we're in February. We're not hitting the rating agency, even if you said, let's go now, we're not hitting the rating agencies before that comes out.
Okay.
If you all chose, if you knew that you knew your not to exceed amount, right? You said the project's $8 million, let's throw $8.5 million not to exceed amount in. You don't have to issue that, that's just the ceiling. Throw that in the authorizing ordinance. Approve it in March, publish it in late March. BINA in April, earliest we can sell is May. So, but that, and then the latest we can sell is April 3 years from now. So.
When is the interest rate locked in?
When we sell the bonds to investors, so on the day of pricing, so that's, if you look at the grand scope of this timeline, essentially 2 to 3 weeks before we end, we lock in the rate. And then we work towards closing, which is the funding, and signing a lot of documents for you guys.
Chief, do you have any questions or concerns?
I don't. I was going to speak to it, and I will in a little bit more detail during my report. But we had the kickoff meeting with the architects. I mean, we had done some pre-work in advance of referendum, as this group knows, in terms of what our rate increase referendum was going to be in order to make all of this happen. We had our kickoff, and of course, things have changed dramatically since we started that process to the kickoff meeting a couple of weeks ago with the architecture firm. So we're early on in the process, and we're meeting every other Wednesday. Again, I'm going to get into a little bit more detail in a minute, but we're meeting every other Wednesday with the architecture firm while we're getting all that stuff settled, so that we gave them a not to exceed number at our first meeting, at our kickoff meeting, and now we're going to try and work inwards from there. And we should have, to Anthony's points, we should have timelines and some better cost projections within the next couple of weeks, which will really give us a better idea of what we're looking at, I think, from my limited. So.
Yeah, that would certainly then drive what we do on the financing side. Yeah, we don't want to pull the trigger too early. You don't have enough information. You best case, even if we issued the right amount, you're still sitting on funds waiting for you.
Just because I'm new to this. Is there any other type of bond vehicle or thing that we should know about, or to know that this is the correct process that we should use?
Yes, absolutely. So there's one other way that you can issue non-referendum debt, and that's a fire protection note or a debt certificate. Those are really the same thing, just called different things. So in that case, that's one meeting process. You don't have to go through the backdoor referendum. You don't have to do the BINA hearing. The difference is there's no backup property tax. So that property tax that you're abating every year, that doesn't exist in the fire protection note. It's just it's just a budgetary obligation appropriated every year. But because of that, so it's an easier process. No abating, there's no free meetings, all of that. But because there's no geo backing to an investor, it's slightly more risky, in which case you pay more interest. So, typically anywhere between 15 and 30 basis points, depending on the credit. Compared to an alternate revenue source.
Which would be roughly.
So right now.
How many basis, comparison?
So if your baseline alternate revenue source bond is at 4% for 20 years, just right now, let's say it's 4%. If we instead did it as a debt certificate, call it anywhere from 4.15 to 4.3%. The other difference with debt certificates is you can't go beyond 20 years. So if we're talking about doing a 25-year loan, depending on the amortization or debt service that you all want to target, you cannot do that with a fire protection. It's limited to 20 years. So those are the two things, besides going to referendum and getting a geo bond, which has a property tax. Those are the two non-referendum borrowers.
And I would say now most people are doing alternate revenue bonds more than years ago, like when I started doing this 20-something years ago, I was seeing, whenever I just saw fire protection notes or debt certificates. I would say in the last 10 years, it's definitely more alternate revenue bonds.
Yeah.
Is it really just because you have the backing and protection of it falls to property taxes by default if something can't happen? Is that?
Quite honestly, I leave that up to the financial guys. They decide what's the better vehicle for, sorry, I changed it to guys. I depend on them to tell us what's the best financial vehicle. And what I've seen lately is, in the last 10 years for sure, at least, is alternate revenue bonds.
And I would like to keep that terminology. Alternate revenue.
Right.
I think so too.
It's,
Soft.
but to your point, it's, yeah, leave the GO out of it. But to your point, it's exactly what you said. It's the reason that they trade better, the reason investors will pay a lower rate of interest for them is because they have that GO back. Because to them, it's a GO. To an investor, it's a GO, it's a general obligation. Whereas the debt certificate is not, it's full faith and credit, but there's no property tax back. So it's a different thing. It's nuanced for an investor. And it means that slight rate penalty you pay for the debt certificate, which is why lately, you're right. Well, I mean, I typically don't do debt certificates unless there's a reason to do a debt certificate. And, they exist, but, we're doing all the bonds if we can. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Does James have anything to add?
James?
No, the only thing I'd add is that I've worked with Anthony a lot on bond issuances and really his firm and Spear and him do a great job quarterbacking. I mean, there's a lot of hand holding that's needed through this process. It's very technical. And so they do all of that for us. And then my job is just to make sure we can afford the payments. And so that's what we're really looking at in a budgetary perspective is, depending on the terms, and I was just looking at, Anthony had drawn up some draft analysis already for us. You're looking at north of $500,000 that we have to make sure we can budget for to make the payment on a 25-year your bond issuance. So that's what I'm looking at when we run the draft budget figures. And so far it looks very good that we'll be able to afford that. But again, Spear does a really good job making sure we dot the I's, we cross the T's. And again, then what we're left with is are the payments. And we just have to make sure that we're fiscally responsible in that regard, which we will be.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Okay.
We're good. Thank you.
Very much.
I need a roll call, correct?
Need a
We need a
motion in a second
motion.
first.
I need a motion. Yeah, I need a roll call I need a motion. Yeah.
Move to accept the reports as presented. Also.
President Gauss,
Yes.
Secretary Sass.
Yep.
Trustee Simpson.
Yes.
Trustee Allen.
Yes.
Motion passes. Chief. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
President. Thank you.
Thank
you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
As I
Sweater.
Sweater.
Well, I'm a dude.
This dude.
All right, now.
Gotta run the penalty and buy a sweater. Yeah.
So the special operations drill this month was water/ice rescue. So people falling through the ice at a pond. It was a live simulated incident with anywhere between 2 and 4 victims, depending upon the different scenarios. And the concentration was on deployment of the assets, getting people downrange in the water, setting up command structure, scene security, witness interviews, accountability. So it was a real incident simulated. So really good for us, and the troops did an amazing job. It's really a point of emphasis in terms of our capabilities in the alliance itself is the fact that we absolutely knock this stuff out of the park, and we train really well on it. So compliment hosted by Roselle.
Wouldn't look good if it's a recovery.
So super job, great job of hosting by them. And again, we're the principally the two major dive teams in the alliance, and two of the major ones in the area. So,
Give credit where credit's due.
That's
Have we
right.
had any call outs with that team this month at all?
we have not had any recently, goodness.
Yeah.
Typically though, I can't think of a year ever that the dive team, and the guys can speak to this too, the dive team wasn't the busiest of the three specialty teams of water rescue, hazmat, and TRT. And usually there's more water incidents in a given year than there are the other two combined. So the water teams are historically very active. Thankfully, we haven't had a lot of work I can think of recently.
Not a lot of ice on.
No.
But just in general, I mean, yeah, whatever. So, you know,
Generally.
a lot of times, you know, on this time, well, not this time of year, but when weather's typically like this, you'll have a lot of things where the ice is getting very unstable. Pet goes out, pet goes through, person goes out to get the pet. That was a common, we had, what, 3 or 4 of them last year. So, and that was kind of what we were doing with the training session up in Roselle. This past week was kids were out plans, unstable ice, went through the hole, go out there and get down, and then, you know, a couple of them were on the surface, a couple of them were subsurface, so they had to, first arriving companies that didn't have the dive equipment had to figure out a way to try and get someone who's under the ice, and was there a way to go about doing it, and, you know, in terms of using makeshift aids, pipe bowls, trying to sweep and grab things, and that kind of stuff, so that while the dive teams themselves, like ours, are, like in our case, we're responding up to Roselle, it's gonna take us a while to get there. So what can they do to maximize the opportunity to hopefully have a positive outcome while we're still heading that way? And that was the scope of that training, was for first in firefighters and companies. Monthly drill was supposed to be, and it is kind of an in-house, so it's a skill review. So we're getting ready to kick off our training year. In March, it'll be single family up to Station 28 Carroll Stream, where we're going to be doing, you know, full blown sessions in single family house fires. So this month is a bit of a skill review, forcible entry, all that kind of stuff. Supposed to be in-house. West Chicago took leadership, and they're hosting some training out at Crest Road to do some of that stuff, working on some of the skill set in preparation for the start of our training year, where we can maximize the training opportunity by having a skill set up, so we can not have to worry about remedial tasks as much as the overall operation, and that's a good thing. And compliments to them. First company, our first training session, as usual, was today, and then the next 2 days as well, they'll be going out to Crest Road. In terms of recent incidents, in January 21st, we had an electrical fire on Barnes Avenue. We were assisted by Wheaton, West Chicago, Carroll Stream, and Bloomingdale. So you'll notice a lot, Bloomingdale came to us a lot over the course of the last month. Why, you ask? Because ladder trucks are a fairly rare asset. I mean, not, you know, ambulances and fire engines are the most common asset, then ladders and tower ladder trucks, then heavy rescue squads, tenders heavy rescue squads and tenders are not a common asset. And ladders are more common than those, but less common than fire engines, and ladders are not friendly in terms of maintenance. So a lot of the tower ladders and ladder trucks in our area have been out of service a lot in recent times, so we're bringing them in from farther distances. So just something, you know, that you guys need to know when the subject comes up with the residents and you're talking to them, that recently we've had to pull Bloomingdale's tower ladder here a lot. It was just out here last night, in fact, for a call.
What do we got? Towers in West Chicago, Carroll Stream, Wheaton?
So interestingly, in our case, the 4 closest fire stations in every direction have a tower ladder in them. West Chicago Station 6 downtown on Fremont Street, Carroll Stream Station 28 on Coon Road, Wheaton Station 38 behind Target, and then Warrenville Station 11 down South Winfield Road. The 4, but I don't know if all 4 of those have been in service anytime in the last. What do you think, guys?
38's in service, 6 is out of service. Right. Bloomingdale's been in service. That's been in and out periodically over the last 2 weeks. The problem with those vehicles is they're extremely heavy, and your ladder takes a pounding running down the street all the time because the state hasn't been doing such a good job on their streets, and it's just beating the crap out of them. So that's kind of the problem, is keeping it.
Yeah, so, but to his point, so that's why you'll hear the Bloomingdale thing a lot, and that was why it's specifically for their Tower 23, which is coming out of over by the mall. Again, it's just one of those things, and when we start talking about assets and going back to what our communications and our outreach to our community, is these are all some of the bigger picture things that matter, and you know, if you're getting to cost and service levels and all that other stuff.
Too bad they couldn't cut a deal with Glen Ellen. We buy a tower, because they'd go to their calls when they needed it.
Moving on. Had a car versus building on Church Street on the January 22nd. We were assisted by Wheaton and Carroll Stream.
Happens a lot on that street. At the church. Oh, I didn't say that.
Also on the 22nd, we had a small garage fire. We were on Jefferson. We were assisted by Wheaton, West Chicago. On the 29th, Geneva County Farm Road. I know a lot of people had inquired about what was going on over there a lot recently. There have been a lot of inquiries about what's going on at County Farm in Geneva. It's been, unfortunately, in all the wrong ways, a busy place recently. Geneva County Farm, we had an extrication accident on the 29th. We were assisted by Wheaton, Carroll Stream, and Bloomingdale.
They have a pole come down there too.
There was a pole affected. It was up, but and that was another call entirely. Was for the a pole on fire the other day at that intersection. Oh, it is. 15th. February 15th, Geneva County Farm Road. There was
I got stuck there.
wires call. Actually, handled by Lieutenant Dillion's crew, as I recall, and it was a slightly unique situation where they had to find some makeshift ways to mitigate the incident. So compliments to him. On the 19th of February, Roosevelt and Indian Road, we had an extrication accident. We were assisted by West Chicago, Wheaton, Warville, and I will actually take this opportunity to point out good work done by the crews. It didn't come in as an extrication. It upgraded in progress. Our neighbors did a good job of minding the radio and actually jumping the call to assist us, which was good. And actually, one of our firefighters, Jeff Littledale, did a nice job because things were it was a spread out accident. There was some stuff going on, and he did a nice job of stepping in and assuming medical control and really getting that call dialed in really well. So compliments to him, even though he's not here to hear it. Yeah, I did talk to him about it though. And on the 20th, last night, we had a structure fire on Manchester Road. We were assisted by Wheaton, West Chicago, Carroll Stream, Warrenville, and Bloomingdale, both the tower ladders. There were no service anniversaries this month. In terms of the fleet update, the last report I got for the new fire engine is it has an expected completion date of August 23. As you saw, tender 31 is back from its damage, and it was better than anticipated, so that was good news. The answer we got was better than we anticipated. The air cascade unit, which you'll see obviously on the floor over there, so it was delivered. Unfortunately, it was delivered damaged. Brian Burke, Deputy Chief Ermer, have done a nice job communicating back and forth with the company, the vendor, to get that resolved. Grant update, obviously, is later on the agenda, but Robin, at my behest, President Kels, to his credit, President Kels's best, has been trying to get a hold of the right people at Northwest Medicine to start initiating a conversation with respect to the upcoming renewal of that grant process. And we literally just got an answer today.
Yeah.
So we have the contact information to start working forward with that.
We have the liaison, and then we also have the contact people, so if there's any issues with making connections, I have them in person.
So we can start getting to work on meeting them and start getting the dialogue going. As a reminder, we are in year 4 of the 5 years, so this coming August typically would be the final payment of that grant. New firefighter paramedic update. We have 2 starting. Thank you to the board for your support, and thank you for me, because they need to really we have 2 new members that are going to be starting on the 20th. Their start date is Monday the 27th. Lieutenant testing, the initial eligibility list is posted. We're in the waiting period for people to apply for veterans preference points. At the conclusion of that, the commission is going to be meeting to have the final list. So it's up on the commission board or by the bottom of the stairs. Going to have a look at the different components throughout the process, and then the initial eligibility list. Phone service status. So we've had some problems in recent times. Our phone system is no longer supported, and it would cost us a considerable amount of money to upgrade it. In addition to the phone service that we pay, just the phone lines.
Usage, yeah.
So we've been investigating, as I had reported in previous meetings, about what to do about that. So we've had some failures in the phone system, and thankfully they've been able to get the phone system to restart, essentially. But there's no parts, there's no pieces. It's on its last legs.
I got a dial phone, it still works.
Yeah.
Well, we're almost there. And
We didn't educate everybody on how to use the dial.
Yes.
Because they're all-
There's some youngsters that probably don't know what this means.
Yeah.
And also we've been getting a lot and Robin had reached out to some of her colleagues out and about, and this is becoming a thing. A lot of spam phone calls we're getting. You guys will tell you, dozens a day.
I had 245 phantom voicemail messages in one night.
Holy cow. So
Yeah. It says Roselle in Schaumburg. It says a town name, and then you answer it, there's nobody there. And so, or it says unavailable, or it says private, and 245 of them.
yeah, so we've obviously, for all those reasons, again, going back to the previous meetings where I said that we were starting to investigate that. So what we've kind of arrived at is bringing in some vendors, and for a nominal, I mean, a couple of dollar nominal,
Yeah, $5 difference.
we can get a phone system included with the phone service, which will be on a turn-in lease situation, so we won't get into the same bind we have with an outlay of cash.
And it's a pod-based system, so that way it's always updated, and there's no hardware issues that go into play, because if something happens, they just replace it. We don't get hit with the taxes and all the fees because it's considered a lease versus a purchase. So it's basically a $5 difference per month, maybe 6 on a bad month.
And we don't have the outlay of the actual cash to buy a phone system, so we're leaning that way. I just wanted to inform the board because we've been working on it. I think it's.
I would only caveat that I don't know how the phone system works, whether there's size involved and that sort of thing. To keep the new facility in mind.
We've already talked about that, the number of phones, the number of stations, and the number of voicemail boxes, and can it be relocated for a new facility, and that's an easy fix. And so any changes we need to make, whether it's reduction or increasing of stations, that's just, it happens on
I
that
just
date.
want to make sure it has the capacity.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that we're investigating now, but like question one is, what can we do with respect to relocating it to the new facility without incurring any complications?
Do you have other alliance or other partner agencies switch to these systems? I guess my worry is, if you lose your internet connection, is there
Is it an internet connection phone? Is it like?
Indirect.
It is the
phones,
voice over
Yeah,
IP.
VoIP.
Most departments are
Okay.
going with that now because the hard lines are becoming so expensive.
do we have a backup now? Station alerting systems, one thing, because you get radio updates when you have calls, but would that be is there some sort of backup connection system? Do you have a data backup redundancy? Do you have 2 internet lines running in or anything like that here?
I don't think so.
No.
But on the other side, all of our emergency calls go through DUCOM, and then they're dispatched out. So if our phone line goes out for a couple hours, or whatever, it's not going to be an emergent thing.
Sure.
But most of them are going voice over IP just because of storage in the cloud. Everything else it's
Copper phone lines are becoming, in fact, we had downsized several of those lines when Robin and I had investigated this probably 2 years ago, and we got
like a $4,000 refund on our Call One account because all these lines were I mean, literally $4,000 of lines sitting out there because they're so expensive to maintain. They just keep upping the cost and they, in the hopes that they encourage you to just stop using them. So.
Which it
it's-
worked.
Yeah,
So.
Yeah.
So I don't think the downside is much, because in terms of dispatching, which is ultimately what matters the most. There's so much redundancy built in with respect to the pagers, the phones, cellular phones, all of the other stuff, the station alerting, it's on a dedicated Comcast line. And in point of fact, one of the conversation points with the architects is actually looping us into the microwave system to eliminate that as well. And all that stuff in the future, but for right now, the downside, if we miss some business calls because of an outage, we miss. But
plus the provider that we're looking at is encouraging us to go with fiber optic versus regular wiring because that is more reliable and the likelihood of outage is significantly reduced. We've been toying with waiting until we move to the new facility to do that, just because
Right.
there's a bigger cost outlay on that.
Right.
We haven't had a lot of issues with outages more than 45 minutes or something with Comcast periodically, but it's not been.
Which brings me back to, can it convert the phone system to hardwired to fiber optic? Should we choose not to go fiber optic until we can use it? So,
Well, they would use the current internet system that we have in place here.
okay,
And then we would run fiber optic in the facility. We could run fiber optic here too. It's just a matter of the cost. We'd have to evaluate the cost versus the need.
I don't know if it's worth the cost of that.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Right.
that was our
That's what
inclination.
we-
Right, right.
But the system would be able to transition from the Comcast here to a fiber over there without
Yes.
changing systems.
Yes.
That's handy.
And for a $5 difference, it'll be life changing
Yeah.
in many respects. 245 voice notes, so life changing.
I'd say keep looking into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to keep the board abreast of what's going on. And then the last thing I mentioned, during the financial portion and with, Anthony here is, in fact, 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks past tomorrow, we had our kickoff meeting with the architects and we had the basic framework for a plan, but as you can see, anyone that's driven by the work being done on the site, stakes in the ground and all that other stuff. So we've already initiated surveys, engineering, boring, soil borings, all that stuff is in progress. Thankfully, it's been a mild winter, so it helped.
There isn't soil borings from when they put the subdivision in?
Not that they could find when they went back and reviewed the materials. Not for that, not for our parcels.
Any calls from over there wondering what's going on?
Nope. No, we actually visited with several of the people in the neighborhood in advance of all this, and actually the support was more positive than we had suspected.
Really? Oh, yeah. I would like to.
One or two. Everybody I talked to.
When there was meetings on supportive in the architect. I welcome in.
Wednesdays, 10 a.m.
There.
9 a.m.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Wednesdays.
9 a.m. So tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Or in 2 weeks at 9 o'clock. We're trying to keep it.
I'm planning to be there.
Yeah, as long as we got two or less, we're good, right?
Right,
So-
so 3, it's me.
Not necessarily reading your minds.
No.
The three of us, nothing will get done, so we're better off on two.
And so the kickoff meeting and basically we got back, obviously costs have gone up in the economy that we're in. So we kind of focused on some of those conversations. Not that they have that established yet, just a kind of a not to exceed, going back to the conversation we had a few minutes ago, not to exceed, kind of, look, we can't go, because we went out for referendum based on a figure that we know is no longer gonna work. But this is what we gotta keep it under. And then a little bit about some of the particulars about the station. Revisiting our needs and the stuff that we had to have. So that's where the kickoff meeting essentially went, and Robin can add to that if I missed anything. And from here it's going, and we're starting to work on, okay, what's the timeline gonna be, and then starting to firm up some of the dollars that we're talking about, some of the cost projections. Which brought us back to James and Anthony, and then starting this conversations, because it's a lot of moving parts, a lot of, I often use the analogy of the old variety shows with the plates
Spinning
spinning on
plates.
the spinning plates on the sticks. And there's a lot of that going on for the administrative staff right now, trying to get all this stuff to coordinate so that we can start getting this moving. So a lot of work, compliments to the staff for a lot of stuff going on, trying to keep it all straight so we can curb the cat, so to speak. So, yeah, so far, I think we have just this one and the next one on everyone's schedule, but we're going for every 2 weeks, Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. And that's my report.
Thank you. As usual.
Is there an agenda for the meeting every 2 weeks?
Not
No.
yet. There will be, but at this point, we're still a little loose in the framework of getting ourselves organized.
Still wrestling in the sand.
Yep.
My young friend.
Main thing is that and it doesn't apply for you per se, the disaster declarations or the remote meeting thing's gonna end on May 11th for sure. The governor's announced that. You guys are doing your meetings in person for the board. So, but in theory, if you were not, you would be able to do them, well, the governor has to reissue the disaster declaration every 30 days by law. But he's told us that they will end on May 11th, which is a good bet that they'll continue to May 11th. So if you needed to do a remote meeting, you could. At that point, if you have to do, once that ends, then a trustee would only be able to attend remotely based on the kind of the policy you guys adopted a month or two ago. That's primarily it. There's like 4,000 bills introduced in the last couple of weeks because the Senate, the last day for the senators to introduce the bill was Friday. The Friday before that was the House. I know on the House did theirs, there was like 2,000 bills. I want to say there was another 2,500. A lot of them are just things that really aren't that concerned about, but there are some. We'll get, once we get a legislative update from the NIFP, I think she actually prepared one. I can get it to you guys. I know like one of the bills actually allows you to bill for a lift assist, which I don't know if you guys are doing that or not. Most people are not. So I don't know how many lift assist calls you get. And then you get some, so
A lot.
yeah. So, those are things that, can be a good effect for you guys. We'll keep a handle of it and we'll just let you know.
We have to give back half of that back to the state.
No.
Just checking. We asked them so they can get more money,
Yeah.
And if we do this and we ask for half,
They'll do the work. The sad part is that if you start billing for what this is, they're not gonna call you. They're the people who need it. They're the people that are gonna have trouble.
Yes, sir. Okay, great. A
Thanks, Joe.
motion, any old business?
I make a motion, we approve the consent agenda.
Second. Support. All in favor?
I was waiting for you to do a voice, sorry.
Not for the consent,
I was just making sure.
I'm to the point where I'm just ready to do roll call and everything. You've got me, I'm so nervous. And I'm wearing the pens, it's just like, it's got me right on edge here, so. Anything you want to talk about on the monthly report, since Rob's not here to point it out?
Just that we are actually slightly down
I noticed that.
this year to date. And we were due, so, and those that know me, like all of you, know that I'm a whole trend line and stats nerd.
Can you keep this short?
No.
He's earning his money.
Rob doesn't take this off. Come on.
So typically every few years, agencies will see a downturn year, and this may or may not be ours. I actually thought last year was good. We were the only agency that was up in the heart of the COVID year, the only one. So the number doesn't particularly surprise me, and unfortunately, we continue trending wise to go up with just the world. And actually, with all of the incredible work that the troops have been doing recently, it's an additional benefit, the fact that it's been a little slow this year, so they've gotten a little bit of relief with all of the monster hours that they're putting in. That's good.
That's great. All right, new business. You want to take action on a tentative budget?
So for my purposes, for your tentative budget, you don't have to, the minutes will just reflect that it's available But you don't have to actually vote on the tentative budget.
So I can remove this RC right here.
Also, they don't have to accept it, it's just available.
It's a tentative
Right,
budget.
yeah, it has to reflect that the tentative budget is available.
Because it is tentative until we know what our numbers really are.
Right, yeah.
Because I was concerned about the. Okay, great. So, are there any questions from the board on that? We've all seen it, we all read about it. Okay, we're all good. Discuss and take action on the Safer Grant Award. You want to
I said we accept the motion. I'd make a motion, we accept it.
I would look for a second and then some discussion.
Do we have something in writing or?
What was the outcome on that?
First of all, I need to second it. I'll second it,
Uh-huh.
and now we can discuss.
So we have a discussion.
So.
Don't be screwing the.
Well, I mean, sometimes governments grants come with strings.
As,
They do.
they all do.
Yeah.
The,
Right about that.
in
Right.
2021, as the board will recall, we pursued a safer grant, which is a FEMA grant to pay payroll costs for firefighters. Those grants from year to year to year to year change in terms of what the structure of the grant award is. In the 2021 year, it was a 3-year, 100% grant. So that's what we anticipate getting, is certain payroll costs to be covered by this federal grant for a period of 3 years, at which point, at the conclusion of that, we have to promise that we're gonna keep them employed for an additional 5 years after that. So these have to be new positions, so there's a lot of paperwork that would go involved, assuming that we accept the award. A lot of paperwork the staff will have to do back to FEMA, and one of those things is a roster, so you can't. All the names that were there before they start giving you the money, it can't be, there have to be 3 other names after. So this grant period was supposed to have been concluded last September. And it was, and we didn't get anything. We didn't get a yes, we didn't get a no, we didn't get anything. And a lot of other agencies didn't either. And then, right after the grant period ended, there was a notification that through another federal program, there had been hundreds of millions of dollars added to the 2021 federal grants for the fire service. You know, the FEMA grant and the SAFER grant. And then the waiting period began, and it was, you know, it was going to be the end of November, and the board knows, because I was giving monthly updates every month. It's supposed to be the end of November, it's supposed to be the end of December. It's definitely gonna be by the end of January, and then they promised us February, but this time I was more inclined to believe it because the 2022 year SAFER grant application period opened, I think, the day before we got the notification of our award. So in our case, it is approximately $684,000 to cover
Per year?
no, total, the grant award total over the 3 years for entry-level firefighters, certain, and not every, but certain payroll costs. So the bulk of the employment cost on the pay stub of employees for that 3-year period, of which time we would have. So that's what we owe back to the feds is we take the money, it will offset substantially the cost of 1 per shift, 3 firefighters. It will.
So we're applying for another one?
For 3 years.
For 3 years, and then after that, we have to agree to keep that position. It could be, if they could leave and go to another fire department, we have to keep that position filled for 5 years after.
So you're not gonna be able to go from, in 3 years, go from say 18 to 15, you're gonna stay at 18.
Right, which should be.
Right.
This is what it should be. I mean, I think that's.
So there's a certain amount of stuff, a certain amount of paperwork that I'll have available. I'm happy to share with the board. If the board elects to accept the award, you literally go into the FEMA website, click the accept or the decline button. If you accept the accept button, then you get this whole batch of paperwork that is basically the synopsis of your award, and then the steps you have to start taking to be awarded the money.
So this
After
is
you
an
get the
initial acceptance?
Yes.
And congratulations, because I know districts that would probably chiefs that would probably sell their last born son for a SAFER grant.
Yeah, it's so much. We
The last born one.
We
We needed this, so, yeah.
Is there a date we have to have it hired by?
It's an excellent question. So there is, I think we have to accept or decline the award by March 14th, I think it said on the FEMA site. And then after that, you have 180 days to get those people hired. But the federal government and FEMA is cognizant of the staffing shortages nationwide for the fire service. So if you are in communication with the regional representative for FEMA, that is a flexible, if, you know.
You're at least in the process.
Yeah, we just ran a test and everyone already got hired. There's no one available. We got to run another test. And they'll give you extensions for that as long as you communicate with them and they know that
Yeah, as long as we
working
can
towards
take
it.
that.
Let me ask you this question, Chief. So we have a staff of roster of 15.
Yes.
We apply for the FEMA grant, so we can be up to 18.
Yes.
And we lose 2 people. Does that affect the FEMA grant at all?
No, it's just a role position we need to fill.
Okay.
Because you gotta just fill those spots.
Alright.
So do we have 180 days after
maintain this, okay.
Yeah.
First have to have those two
That
spots.
position.
Okay.
It's 180 days, I think, after we accept
It just
the
means
grant.
that you gotta
Maybe
be.
it is-
Well, let's say a year and a half.
Right.
That's.
Yeah, well, I just want to make sure that it's not like.
Do we have another 180 days?
Now you're down to 17, or you're down to 6.
No, it doesn't work like that. It's just a matter of doing what we're doing now with the
No,
15.
not.
Someone,
You're gonna say
someone
at that new number.
separates for another agency, someone retires, someone goes off the job on a disability, you just fill the position like we've always done.
Right.
And the CBA and
Well,
the
if we have to
commission,
retest, that's what I'm saying, let's say 2 years, because we test every 2 years.
well, we retest every time a list expires or that we exhaust the number of people that are on there. So we always have to have a current list.
Yeah.
You have to have a
Right.
purpose.
What's the expiration?
2 years,
2 years.
or if you go through them all and they're
So
all hired.
We,
someplace
all
else,
the
we
people
say
that we
no.
went through, they could have all been.
There
hired
isn't an
somewhere.
agency anywhere around here that I'm aware of that has gone 2 years between tests these days.
Right.
None.
Is there any concern or, impact on the CBA with this?
Shouldn't be, I don't think so.
I'm just
I haven't
making,
looked at the
making
CBA.
sure,
Yeah,
The CBA determines when, the CBA and our commission rules determine when we have a vacancy, how we fill it and within what time frame. But
there's nothing on
that's-
staffing levels that's.
Well, there's a minimum,
but not
minimum
maximum.
manning level of 5.
But there's not a maximum.
yeah,
For any
usually,
reason.
usually you have a minimum manning, you don't have
Yeah.
a maximum. I
I mean,
mean,
I-
as far as for the safer grant, I don't see the CBA affecting that at all.
Okay.
In regards to a lot of times what we have in your CBAs that affects the commission is that under the Promotions Act, how the criteria for promotions will be in there. But in regards to this part, the CBA shouldn't have any effect.
Because the grant doesn't stipulate what those pay rates are gonna be. We applied based on our pay rates.
Correct.
So they'll be paid at the CBA's.
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure.
Did he know about?
How do you know that?
Yeah, I can confirm.
Heard it. Thanks, Radar.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, man, very impressive.
We're teaching that stuff.
So do you want a roll call vote on
Yes,
this?
please.
Yes, please.
Okay. President Callis,
Yes.
Secretary Sutton.
Yes.
Trustee Simpson.
Yes.
Trustee Young.
Yes.
Thank you. Review and take action of adopting SOPs 320, 326, 600, 906.
These were fun to read.
Yeah, 906, 908, 909, 916, 917, 914, 918.
1014.
Excuse me, 1014, 1018, 1020, 1029, 1030, 1034, 1037, 1040 as corrected by our astute trustee Luke. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Roll call.
President Callis,
Yes.
Secretary Sutton.
Mhm.
Trustee Simpson.
Yes.
Trustee Young.
Yes.
I will say, I had to sit down 3 different times to read this. I'm sitting there and I'm just going. Oh, okay, all right, and I go take a walk, have a glass of water.
I did
sit
it in-
back down
I
and.
broke it up.
And my wife is like, are you gonna get that stuff off the table? No, don't lose my spot.
Over.
I have to start all over.
Next one, Steve.
Thank you.
Does this move us kind of close to halfway through, how you feeling in the big process?
We're right at halfway. I'd like to get to 60% here rapidly, because at that point, then the next phase of training and then more implementation kind of gets something. We're at 40% in October. We got 20 more done. We should be knocking on the door of 60% here by the next month, probably.
Thank you. Neat, good job. I need a motion to, I should probably wait for this. We need a motion to approve the surplus list disposition.
Motion to approve the surplus list.
Second. Roll call?
Trustee Kells.
Yes.
Secretary Sass.
Yep.
Trustee Simpson.
Yes.
Trustee Young.
Yes. What's our thought process? Are we gonna be able to auction any of this off, or is it all gonna get donated?
That's the big one, is obviously this SCBA fill station, and there's not sure what the market out there is.
Well,
So
there's companies that probably use it.
yeah, there's companies that we was wondering whether a scuba shop would use that type of thing. It's more than enough PSI and the bottles. So as long as they're hydroed and they can hydro their own bottles there.
Maybe we should advertise them on coastal regions.
Well, on govdeals.com, it goes nationally. I mean, we're shipping things to Atlanta last time, the boat motor. That was a nightmare.
That was fun.
Where did the fire engine go?
Wasn't it the captain or whatever?
Fire engine went locally to
Willie,
a,
Willie Majors or
yeah.
something.
just a salvage yard, salvage shop. They salvaged, parted it out and salvaged it.
I'm gonna need a motion to pay the bills.
Second.
Roll call?
Trustee Kells.
Yes.
Secretary Sass. Trustee Simpson.
Yes.
Trustee Young.
Yes. They don't take it as a trade on buy a new one.
And then we will
We tried one place.
take a brief reset and then move into executive sessions. That's what we do.
Yeah,
now?
use it for sell or lease of property by the district, or setting the price of sell or lease property by the district. The appointment and employment for compensation benefits of specific employees. Is there any pending litigation, or is that just on there just to be on there? Okay, so 2C5 and 2C1.
She puts it all on there.
Just be careful.
Yeah.
We're good.
Every month.
You look at me like you're scared.
No, whenever I say litigation, I'm like always like, okay.
It's just always on there,
Yeah.
just in case.
Which is good, because that way you're prepared.
I don't want you guys to get too comfortable because there's just no action to be taken. You're more than welcome to sit here all night. It's probably your favorite room, your favorite chair.
My favorite chair.
Right.
There you go.
So, there's no action to be taken. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Thank you. Thank you all, as usual. A good meeting. Thank you very much.